Welcome everyone to our virtual venture cafe Providence Thursday gathering at our new start time, 10:30. We're going to kick it off every week for the next several weeks with a workshop. And today's lucky workshop leaders are Heather and Brian Boyle from CrossTrainer. And I am going to let you guys kick it off.
That sounds great. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to Objection to Innovation, breaking down barriers to XR implementation in corporate learning. For those who aren't familiar with the term XR, that's a bucket term for all of the extended realities, AR, VR, MR. That's how we're going to refer to it today, so I can keep my word count down. But if I'm just referring to a specific technology like AR or VR, I'll refer to it as AR or VR. But the bucket term is XR. I am Brian Boyle. I'm the founder of CrossTrainer, formerly out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, now virtual, fully virtual. We have a team of 15 in the office, working from home now. So I'm a graphic designer, training technologist, and been in the business for 20 years. And the past few years, I've been focusing most of my attention on designing mixed reality applications that deepen learning experiences and actually add value for corporate learning. I live in Seekonk, Mass, with my wife Heather, who's here today, and our two young daughters.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Boyle, Brian's wife of 16 years, and I'm someone who believes that learners are customers and customers are learners. My professional background is in sales and in higher education, and I have an education in instructional design. So excellent customer service is at the core of my learning solutions. As CrossTrainer's business development director, I'm sort of a combination learning consultant, communication strategist, and client service specialist. I have a BS in organizational communication from Providence College, a master's of education in e-learning and instructional design with a concentration in adult and organizational learning. I live in a suburb of Providence, Rhode Island, but a Mass suburb, so we're right over the border in Seekonk, as Brian said. To me, I always say that selling is helping, and when it comes to selling learning, I'm certain there's no greater truth.
So our agenda today, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We'll do a little introduction, level set, explain how we got here and what we're going to talk about today. And then we will be talking about the 5 key objections to XR that we've encountered. And then we'll be talking about innovation that have helped us to address those objections and showing some demonstrations of those innovations. And then at the end, stick around if you're available. If you have any Q&A, we're happy to answer questions, but we'll be holding the questions until the end so that we can get through the whole presentation. There will be a couple polls along the way too, so that'll be fun. Okay, so how did we get here? Well, as I said, I've been in learning design and development, started my agency in 2005 and felt very strongly about the potential for XR in the training industry. And in 2017, we launched CrossTrainer Mixed Reality. We released a few mixed reality games, including Nightfall, which was one of the first 2-player augmented reality games on the App Store. We got featured by the App Stores. We made it into several top 10 game lists. Had some exciting calls with Google and Facebook, and then we turned our attention to enterprise, which is really my comfort zone and my experience is in corporate e-learning. And we set out to blow people's minds with this new technology. It was so easy to get meetings. Everyone wanted to see XR, AR, VR. I flew all over the place. We were always the busiest booth at the trade show. We did immersive art experiences. We dabbled in volumetric video. which is basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's holograms. It's 3D holograms, but used in augmented reality. And launched several products, won an award, and even did a TEDx talk, which I'm very proud of. But here we are 3 years later, over 3 years later, and nowhere near as much adoption as we had predicted. So we had to take a step back and look at why is this happening? You know, our e-learning business is booming, significant growth year after year. So the XR is struggling to take hold. We had some time to reflect this past year, as we all have, and we made some changes in our approach to align it a little bit more with the way that we've had success with e-learning. And so things are clicking. There's a spark. It's a combination of increased need, improved technology, and a healthy dose of realism. So today we're not here to blow your minds. Sorry to disappoint, but we're here to talk about practical XR applications and improved accessibility. Our goal is to help you break down these barriers and promote widespread adoption of the technology that we believe in. Okay, so quick poll. What does everyone think? What do you think are the barriers to implementing AR and VR? Should be able to select your answer there. These are some of our favorites here. Got the equipment, development cost, difficulty to deploy, difficulty to track and measure, and questionable learning value. All right, the results are coming in. And you can choose more than one, by the way. Okay, so, all right, so it looks like the winner is expensive, uncomfortable equipment. All right. Well, but they're all, you know, they're all registering. We're getting, you know, development costs, difficulty to deploy, difficulty to track and measure, and questionable learning value. Everything's registering, but the most concern is that expensive, uncomfortable equipment. Okay, thank you.
So it would seem that the participants here have a little bit of experience in the extended realities and what the objections are. So we're going to kind of break down some of those objections, starting with number one, which was the most popular at 60%. And the objection that we hear is, I don't want to wear uncomfortable or unsanitary equipment. So let's face it, headsets are awkward. We get it. You wear glasses, you don't want to mess up your hair, and that is a lot more important than people believe it is, but I hear that so often. You suffer from motion sickness. You've heard that the headsets will make you feel queasy or nauseous. And there's a highly transmissible virus going around. Not sure if you've heard of it, but that would also be a concern and an objection to putting on a headset. These are all valid objections, but we think these are objections to the headsets and not virtual reality.
So, innovation number one, web VR. We're guilty too of believing and saying that goggles were necessary. But surprisingly, over our experience, the most successful VR applications the most successful VR applications that we've built are web-based and don't require goggles. Are you seeing the results over my screen? Does that keep happening to you guys, or?
Yeah, I just unshared them again. I don't know why it keeps popping up, but
okay, all right. No problem. The reason is that VR experiencers, both worthwhile and still immersive without goggles. So even though the best possible experience is with the goggles and because of limiting distractions, that 180 or 360 way of filming still creates a interactive and self-directed first-person experience that allows learners to learn by doing. Also, we believe that it's really the content that makes the good, rich experience, not necessarily the headset. Broader reach too. You know, if you eliminate the equipment obstacle, if you allow compatibility with desktops, laptops, tablets, phones, you're going to get more widespread use. Corporate sees value in that. You know, less of a novelty, more of a tool. It's going to be adopted. And also, it's easier to measure. Things that are deployed in a browser are just easier to host and easier to track. We're going to touch upon that a little bit later, but you can put that in the parking lot for a note that we'll get to later on how it's measured. So this is an example of a web VR program. This is our client Metro Edison, and I'm not saying there isn't a time and a place for headsets. The Oculus Quest is amazing, and we're building amazing things using that hardware. But to mainstream web VR, leave the hand controls and to the gaming and the hands-on simulations. That's our verdict on the hand controls. If we want widespread adoption, in this case, the audience here is kids and early teens. This look and find style of VR can be controlled by a mouse on your desktop or by a finger on your tablet, or if you do have the headset, by direction of gaze. So very effective, lots of fun, gamified, memorable experience that users want to do over and over. So I'll go ahead and play the demo here. It's about a minute. Remember, this audience is kids and early teens, so it's a little bit out there, but you'll see that this how this works.
M.Ed First Energy proudly presents Energy Efficiency and You. Time to enter the home of the future. Click on the living room icon to enter.
Hi there. Follow me. I'm here to help. Click on me. For this lesson, we'll look around this virtual living room and find ways to conserve energy. More importantly, you'll find ways to save a lot of moolah. Moolah means
Kill the volume on it a little bit. You can still hear me though, I believe, right? Okay. So you can see they're able to control it with their mouse. If they're on a tablet, they're using their finger. We actually call this responsive VR because it responds to whatever device, not requiring the headset. And it's just a very effective tool that is not that difficult to develop. And we'll get to that in the next objection as well.
Now, let's look around the living room and find two more things that waste energy.
Okay.
So browser-based VR, great solution, but it also it's a innovation that helps to overcome this next objection. So objection number 2 is the development cost. It looks awesome, but I don't have the training budget for VR. So many meetings. Everybody wanted to talk about AR and VR. They wanted to see it. They wanted to demo it. They even wanted detailed estimates and mock-ups for it. It used to be that you had to go big or go home if you wanted a VR training activity. Sadly, many went home when they saw the price tag. But time flies in technology, and that brings us right to our next innovation.
legit authoring tools. So I'm an e-learning guy, as you know, and some would say a bit of a e-learning nerd. Heather would say a nerd. So an e-learning authoring tool is a software application that allows us to develop e-learning without writing code. In the training world, there's a lot of benefits to this. Clients want to know that they're not tied to a specific developer. They even want to, even if they're not going to, the authoring tool gives them the peace of mind that they're not tied to proprietary code. It's important for e-learning to be efficient, editable, well documented. We adhere to these rules of the road, and that's why we've experienced such great growth on the e-learning side of the business. So we needed to apply the same line of thinking to VR. As recently as a year ago, all of our VR experiences were created with custom code, making it more expensive to develop, time consuming, difficult to edit, harder for clients to commit to. So a VR authoring tool allows us to design and develop VR experiences without writing code. The one we use the most is Scenario. It's really great. It's helping us drop our prices by as much as 50%, and lowering the cost of entry. Sometimes that savings is then repurposed to buy more VR, which is great. Possibly do higher end 3D graphics or video instead of photography, 360 video instead of 360 photography. So it's really a win-win for the client, the learners, and for us. This is a project that I'm really excited about and very close to. It was kind of the purpose of the TEDx talk that I did, which was on VR therapy. So don't judge, it's just concept art. My business partner, Chris, has quite the imagination here. So this is a little bit out there again, but and normally I wouldn't show this this early, but I find it so exciting that I can't help myself. And it also speaks to the benefit of an authoring tool versus custom code. Now, in this case, this is a headset only project. This is still web VR, but it is intended to be used on the headset. Again, we're not saying headsets aren't good. Headsets are amazing, but not always necessary. In this case, it is. So we have a grant to work with Penn State Health Pediatric to create VR therapy applications. This stalled because of COVID. We couldn't get into the hospitals, but now we're back in action. So the idea behind this project is that you have pediatric patients. They're undergoing a stressful procedure, whether that's maybe they're having a blood drawn, phlebotomy, and we need to distract them. We need to calm them down. We're going to be doing a clinical study with the experts at Penn State Health to prove the effectiveness of this, and we see huge potential. But the beauty of this is built with an authoring tool. I mean, there's a lot more beauty to this, obviously, but one of the things that I'm most excited about is that it's built with an authoring tool. We would have never been able to do concept art in a functional demo if we didn't have this authoring tool. This would have just been storyboards. So I'll show you what we've got going on here. And again, totally just concept art, get the client excited. There's audio, so that imagine the patient is in the room, and we basically transform the room into this, crazy space with all sorts of things to distract them, but they're still in the room. We shot the room, but we've overlaid all this exciting different things, content. So we're, again, concept art, client's very excited about it, moving forward. And I hope that someday we'll come back and report back on the clinical study and how everything went, because I think this is really going to be a game changer. But again, using an authoring tool, we were able to do this mock-up, this functional mock-up that otherwise would have just been storyboards at this phase. So gets the client more excited, project moves faster, everybody wins. Uh-oh, this one's my favorite.
We're going to have to get IT involved. Objection number 3. And there it is, folks, the 8-word kiss of death. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but let me mention a few others. Can we host this? No. Does it have single sign-on? No. Learners have to download an app for that? Yes. Here's me. How does that sound? Corporate stakeholder? No. This is when you have the hurdle of getting IT involved, it really does complicate adoption of AR and VR activities in the learning and development space. So we're going to put up another poll, and part of the reason people did not adopt AR is that they would have to download an app for it. Their learners would have to download an app for it. So we're going to ask you, how likely are you to bail on something when it requires you to download an app? Answers are very likely to bail, depends on how much I want it, and not likely to bail, I have a ton of new apps on my phone, I just add whatever I want. My answer would be, if I'm shopping, I'll probably download the app, and Brian would agree with that.
Well, it depends too on if I'm out in the store. You know, if I'm asked to do a point of purchase AR experience, which is amazing, you know, some of these, but if I'm then asked to download an app on my data plan when I'm in the middle of Target, no way, not happening. I don't want to see it that bad. I don't want to see this AR experience that bad to download a 500 megabyte AR application to have that experience. So I would be in the very likely to bail, to depends on how much I want it type category. Our clients, most of them were in the very likely, a lot of them were in the very likely to bail, because they wanted web-based, they wanted to overcome those hurdles. So
if you think about it, right, in the training world, it can be hard enough to get learner buy-in, learner participation. That's a huge concern in learning and development. And so therefore clients were rightfully concerned that downloading an app would be a deterrent. It creates more friction to their learners completing an activity. So up until about a year ago, most AR solutions would require that users download an app. The thing about that is that the custom apps are complicated to develop. They require a lengthy App Store approval process. So the time it would take to create and install an app was it was hard. And then finally, not only would clients need to commit to 3D design and development, but they would also be committing to app development or an existing app license for seats. And then finally, they are committing to ongoing support across multiple operating systems, iOS apps and Android apps. And so for many, it was just too big of it was just, there were so many objections wrapped into that, that it made it difficult to adopt.
So I pulled the trigger a little bit too quick on this slide. Sorry, Heather, but web AR, this is something that we're very excited about. One second. Yeah, so the rise of web-based delivery versus app-based delivery. Fortunately for us, the folks at Apple and Google really do want AR to succeed. So they quietly began to support native AR file formats on their devices that actually eliminated the need for an app. This means immersive 3D AR experiences with animations deployed with just a URL. This could be, as I talked about, the Target experience there of having to download an app. Instead of downloading an app, you're just visiting a website, maybe through a QR code that you see on a point of purchase display, and then immediately triggering an AR experience off of that display. with web-based also, being able to deploy from your regular website AR experiences when someone's on their phone. So deployed by a URL or even a QR code, hosted on a regular web server, no app store submissions, no delays, 2-week delays to get approval from the app store, none of that. Not limited to phones and tablets either. We can actually create good 3D content on for desktop from the same AR experience, and I'll explain that. This is one of our clients, and they have MRI machine training. So AR is great for equipment training. Imagine now too, you've got new hires, they're working remotely. This is a national company. They're all working remotely, and maybe someone came from Enterprise Rent-A-Car and they've never seen a MRI machine before, or know really anything about it. So what better way to familiarize them with the equipment than with augmented reality? To place that equipment in their space, let them walk around it, let them interact with it and get familiar with it. It's really a home run for equipment training, and augmented reality always has been. But if you just want to train people on one piece of equipment, which is the case with this client, an app is a big long-term commitment to make. It creates a lot of hoops to jump through, as Heather mentioned, for us with IT, security, for the client to get buy-in, and ultimately for the learner that has to then download the app. So this is web AR. And what we did in this to deploy this a year or two ago is now fully possible from a browser. You'll see here, this is the actual product here. Now, I want to just pause here for a minute. I mentioned the desktop view. So this interface, this web AR interface that we built is smart enough to know that you're on a desktop and you haven't launched AR mode yet. In this case, we're showing a recording from a tablet because I am going to launch AR mode, but you can get a good 3D experience with the content even just on your desktop. And then if you are on a tablet or a phone, you click that view and augmented reality button, and you can place that content right in your room and walk around it and interact with it. So again, a year or two ago, we were doing all of this with apps, created a lot of hurdles. And so this is allowing us to get much more widespread adoption and again, with the cost, it's brought our costs down. Clients don't have to pay for that app development or the licenses or the seats or the maintenance. 50%, same as probably what we're dealing with VR. So it's really, again, it's a win-win for adoption of AR.
So this brings us to our next objection. So learning and development stakeholders would say, how do we know who is accessing this and when they access it? Clients need to be able to track their learning. They want easy plug and play. So that's for both user management and for learner analytics. And up until this point, up until some innovations that have recently occurred, neither AR nor VR had a clear and easy path to integration with existing client systems. So this is maybe a little bit of learning industry lingo, but even if you aren't familiar with the concept of an LMS, which is a learning management system, just know that most medium to large size companies have them. An LMS will store, track, and distribute e-learning training modules to employees. And customers that didn't have an LMS before COVID are finding that with a larger virtual workforce, it's absolutely critical. If they didn't need one before, they need one now. And if they did have one, they're finding that it's one of their most important software applications. And so one of the barriers to AR and VR or XR really adoption in learning and development was that it didn't integrate into an LMS. And so, Brian, why don't you talk about the innovation that helps to solve that problem?
Yeah. So LMS, as I said, the software MVP of the past year. If you didn't have one, hopefully you've got one now. If you're a large or medium to large company. So by marrying up the web-based AR and VR to a client's existing LMS, we can leverage the user management, the security, the deployment, the tracking, the reporting, all of that. And best of all, the IT department doesn't have to get involved. I love the IT department. Nothing bad to say about the IT department. It's just if we can make their lives easier by delivering AR and VR in a package that doesn't create any red flags for them or doesn't create extra work for them, if we can build it in a way that it's compliant with their existing system and drop it on there as a package and use all of their existing processes to deploy it and track it, it just makes everything easier, handles the objections, doesn't raise any red flags. So now one thing I should note about this is in the training industry, we need to be able to audit the reporting. We've got all sorts of compliance requirements, and especially with pharma biotech where we do a lot of our work. But for the marketing folks on the call or who might be viewing, there's a lot that you can do with Google Analytics with web-based, obviously. So when you need more anonymous tracking and reporting and analytics, there's also great things that can be do with a web-based deliverable versus, so there's a lot of potential there as well for the marketing goals that don't need that really granular level of LMS reporting. Heather, this one is all yours, I think. These are the Hall of Fame of our.
Oh, yeah, so big fan of these objections here, and it speaks to the learning value of AR and VR as training tools. So why not just use video? Do you have proof of concept? It's cool, but does it really mean better learning outcomes? So there's two components of this objection that make sense to consider. And I think it actually came up in the chat earlier that, a lot of people felt that that AR and VR, that XR really was just a gimmick. So the first thing to consider is the impact of where learning and development decision makers reside within the technology adoption curve and where XR lies on the technology hype cycle. And so like any technology, XR is going to have its innovators and early adopters. Some models would call these visionaries and pragmatists, but within almost every technology adoption curve, there is an area called the chasm. And this is basically the area between the visionaries seeking out new and improved tools for facilitating learning and pragmatists who are looking to improve productivity, but not for a completely new way of doing things. Learning and development pragmatists like to hear from other pragmatists whether a specific learning technology has worked for them. That is to say that it improved learner outcomes and that their ROI was worth it. At the same time, on the technology hype cycle, there is this trough of disillusionment, and you can actually see them plotted together in this graphic. So in our experience, it seemed that the adoption of XR in learning and development and its position on the technology hype cycle were pretty well aligned. So we were somewhere in the chasm and the trough of disillusionment at the same time. And I say this because just a few years ago, there was so much hype surrounding AR and VR in corporate learning and development. We often asked ourselves during the, what is called, you can see on the graphic, the peak of inflated expectations, why isn't everyone using this amazing tool yet? And I think we come to our answer, partly is where XR lies in those two graphs, sort of the technology adoption curve and the technology hype cycle. But also this leads us to learning outcomes, which is good and bad, because as XR technology adoption and learning expands, the evidence demonstrating learner gains has become too good to resist. And this is where we are now. It is expanding. So the innovation, which is more of a quiet and slow moving innovation, this wasn't something that just happened like the like web AR and, so it wasn't something very specific, but over time, we have a more robust body of research. So it's important to note that the education and training community have long been interested in the potential for XR to enhance learning, but it really hasn't been very easy for them. Often by the time one could create and publish a case study around the effectiveness of tech, it becomes obsolete. As early as 2000 or as recently as 2014, a systematic literature review of research and applications for augmented reality noted how little research there was surrounding the effectiveness, limitations, uses, features, and benefits to learning. But many persisted. And I think technology too, there are some things, even though things become obsolete quickly, the body of research has become a little bit more homogenous. We have, there's research on AR, there's research on VR, there's research on MR. And so they're not just kind of piled together in this one sort of label for XR isn't effective or it is effective. This is very specific technologies for very specific types of learning. And so experiments at the college level are leading to an even greater understanding of learner outcomes. So for example, a study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology in 2018 indicated that using VR is counterproductive for learning basic terminology and facts, but it increases student engagement, motivation, enjoyment, and conceptual understanding. In corporate learning and development, there is more research out there, more proof of concept. VR has gained a reputation for being, and I'm sure you've called this the ultimate empathy machine. And a recent study indicated that VR learners were also more confident in discussing issues of diversity and inclusion, as well as acting on what they had learned. So that's a really exciting research coming out there about virtual reality, particularly in the areas of diversity and inclusion, and being able to experience bias and experience like microaggressions from the perspective of somebody, of someone who experiences it. So anyway, from the peer-reviewed studies in higher education to the military, to the results of big budget L&D XR initiatives at companies like Boeing and Walmart, when it's time to produce proof of concept at this point, there's a really good chance that one does exist. You can research it and you can find something that demonstrates that this is going to work. So yeah, that brings us, that's the final objection. I can't think of any more, at least not the big ones. And I don't know if you remember, but we said you had to go big or go home if you wanted to implement XR in corporate learning. And folks, we are happy to say that due to the equipment-free virtual experiences, budget-friendly development, web-based delivery, LMS deployability, and compelling research demonstrating improved learner outcomes, we've moved from that trough of disillusionment into the slope of enlightenment. And that's a very exciting place to be. So looking forward to hearing some of your questions and talking to you about what you thought.
I love the term trough of disillusionment, like that. There have been so many times in the past year that I have been in the trough of disillusionment. I have a question, and then for those of you that are on, if well, there's 21 of us on, so it's a little bit to almost to that size where we can't really all unmute and ask the questions, but I think this group can do it. You can always raise your hand too. There's a raise your hand function. My question is though, you guys were talking about the VR authoring tools and how that allows you to drop costs quickly. Would that also allow you to, or is this taking away from your business model, train somebody at the site then? So if they have a new product they need to add to the virtual shelf or something, yeah, they don't always have to go through you? Is that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the same way that it works with traditional e-learning authoring tools. A lot of times the client wants that, maybe they have internal resources that are designers and developers. Now, to do good e-learning, I'm not even just talking about VR, but to do good e-learning, you need to have graphics, graphics capabilities and program, some familiarity with the computer. Yes, it is do it yourself, but you do need to be pretty savvy on a computer to do well with even with an authoring tool. Not to discourage anyone, it's definitely possible, but you wouldn't want to just hand it off to a client and say jump in and try it. They would need to spend some time with the program. Now, the other thing on top that VR adds to the requirement to use an authoring tool is beyond what we do with the learning authoring tools is you need to have either familiarity with the equipment to shoot 360 video or photography, not just using your phone. You're not going to get a good result from that. You need to use like real VR equipment for shooting the video and getting the audio as well. So you need that technical capability, and there's or possibly as well as that maybe 3D chops, because if you're not going to shoot real video or real audio, you might be creating a simulated environment in 3D to bring into your authoring tool. So it definitely, it's possible, 100% possible. There's no code. It's basically subscription-based software, and it can be 100% can be done. You can collaborate with the client. You can hand off the file and let them take it from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, especially for companies that are trying to showcase a new product without letting it go too far public before
Exactly.
they show it to all their employees or something.
Yeah, rapid prototyping. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a question regarding the technology used in the doctor's office with the patients. Could you make the doctor or the nurse look more friendly, especially with like them being fully masked right now? Could the VR make their face look like their full face?
So I think I know what you mean. So what we were looking at was a completely virtual environment. Are you thinking more like overlaying over their real face using augmented reality?
Yeah.
A little bit different. Great idea. I love it. So the sample that we were showing is they would have a headset on. The child, the patient would have a headset on. We're trying to keep them grounded where they are in the room, but then take them someplace else with audio, with visuals. There's not actual real-time doctor interaction through the headset. It's more of we're trying to distract them and keep them calm during a procedure that is otherwise not pleasant. So augmented reality, I think, is with face detection would be something that would achieve what you're asking about, and definitely possible. Awesome idea. Different type of equipment, different type of programming.
I would think too, especially for people who are in nursing homes or unfortunately hospice care that can't have visitors right now.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of VR would be interesting, although.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, it would work. I mean, there are non-porous inserts that can be cleaned with headsets to make them sanitary. There's all of that is now possible. So it's definitely in the realm of possibility. And especially if you're not using the hand controls. If you're just putting the headset on them and letting them look around without the learning curve of the hand controls. I love the hand controls, but widespread adoption, trying to get it out to the masses. We find keeping it simple, especially with an elderly crowd or possibly younger crowd, is the way to go. Any other questions?
Yeah, there was one question in the chat from Janice. Janice, do you want to unmute yourself, or are you?
Sure. I'm just, I'm trying to half listen. I'm sorry, I'm busy day, but really appreciate this conversation. And I'm in the AR space now too. And just curious in terms of build out costs. I know you talked a little bit about that being a primary objection, that, people think it's not affordable. And I'm kind of curious about range of costs depending on what the build outs are. And if you, also thinking in terms of partnerships, whether we might be able to co-build things. We do have web AR that is not interactive that we use for product sales. So it seems like we have slightly different types of product offerings, but definitely curious to hear your cost range, if you're willing to share some of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables there. I mean, but we can see that with some of these web AR deliverables that we're getting the costs down into the single digits rather than double digits or triple digits. I guess, what am I trying to say?
Under 10,000 versus over 10,000, I think is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. For simple things, we can do it very affordably because we don't have that cost of the app and the seats and the we're focusing more on the 3D modeling and deploying via the web using their existing system. So it really does. There's a time and a place for the app. It's not to say that we're not doing apps. We're definitely doing apps too. But there, for what the client most times needs, we find that we can achieve that with web AR and do it pretty cost effectively. Of course, it depends on how many models are we talking about? How interactive is it? Is it animated? Is it non-animated? Is it a model that is already existing? Is it a 3D model that already exists, or is it a 3D model that we're rendering from scratch? So there's all of those variables that can drive the price up, even with web AR. 100, definitely it can drive the price up, but we're starting at a much lower starting point than we were before. We were starting here before. Now we're starting here and working up with bells and whistles to improve the product, and not really worrying as much necessarily every time about the seats, the licenses, the maintenance, the OS updates, the Android and iOS versions, and all of those things that we otherwise had to deal with.
Yeah, and thinking about like licensing pricing starting at under 10, under in the double digits, literally under $100 versus over $100 versus I think the pricing keeps changing from what I'm seeing in the AR space, and kind of want to keep an eye on how we can effectively produce and make it accessible.
Yeah, love to, continue the conversation about it and kind of get into a little bit more granular detail, offline, and talk a little bit more if you'd like. That'd be great.
Would love to connect. Yep.
Right.
Can I ask one more industry question? Like, I know the defense industry obviously is a big player because that was in your chart, but what are the other, I mean, it looks like medical was a big industry that uses this. You said Walmart, where,
Construction, retail, manufacturing, any sort of equipment or devices. We didn't really talk too much about best use cases for VR and AR as much today because we weren't really introducing the technology as we were talking about improvements in deployment and processes. But with VR, the best use for VR is if you need to simulate an environment that's either difficult to recreate, expensive to recreate, dangerous to recreate in person. So, or if you want to put someone in someone's shoes, like Heather was talking about, the bias and inclusion, all of those concepts, soft skills training with VR is great. So there's a lot of opportunities for adoption. Whereas on the AR side, we see it, equipment training is just such a great fit. And also in retail with experiences, adding content to existing print materials to bring things to life around you, location-based AR. There's a lot of exciting things that can be done with AR, but it's a different type of product, different type of use case. And so sometimes the client comes in not necessarily knowing which one is the best fit. But across all those industries, there's a lot of great fits.
yeah, so it's not just Pokemon Go.
No, but the gaming space is still great, still going. Obviously better than ever. I mean, there's amazing gaming work being done. So.
What's kind of crazy, Amy, is I was just reading an article last night about how Verizon is using virtual reality to train its store managers to be prepared for an armed robbery. I guess at their stores, armed robbery is somewhat common. And so they literally have the managers experience what the being held up at gunpoint and robbed and what they need to do. And their goal for it was to create, they said, the muscle memory, so that when and if they're in that position, they've experienced it, they know what they need to do, what steps they need to take to keep the, to sort of stay, to just kind of prepare them for it. And the same thing too, like Brian mentioned, construction. And I think the oil industry was one of the first to implement VR and training because, it's a dangerous situation, and the accidents that can happen are just horrible. And so, they just want to prepare people to know what to do and have it ingrained in them because they've already experienced it. So
that's awesome.